Welcome to the Witchy Web We Weave. Alex.
I'm Alara.
And we're going to talk about something near and dear to her because she does this on a regular, probably.
Yeah.
So she's got way more experience in this than I do, so.
Okay, today we're going to be talking about tea magic. Tea magic is something that I really wanted to talk about because I feel like it's very accessible to someone that is just starting out. It's also very good if you are trying to witch on the cheap or if you're witching on the sly.
Broom closet for sure.
Yes. Now, this is the thing. I actually really got into tea magic because it was something that I had already done before I even really started along this particular spiritual path of mine. I always liked drinking tea, cold or hot, and it was kind of surprising once I got into to witchcraft and paganism that I actually went back and I was kind of looking and I was making myself a cup of tea and I was doing what I normally do and I was like, oh, I've been doing this for years. And it just kind of evolved from there because a lot of these teas were actually already in my cabinet beforehand. And actually this whole tower of tea, yeah, this is all mine. None of it's hers. It's mine.
Yeah, no, I have a couple teas, mostly at the moment stealing them from my mom because I don't really have a lot of my own tea. But for instance, that is really delicious.
Tulsi?
Yeah, they have a lot of other flavors, actually.
Oh, okay.
This is just the one she happened to have. It's really mild and actually really good and soothing. It says it's stress relieving, but also energizing. I'm not sure how that works, but it's delicious.
But yeah, so I just started incorporating teas that I already had in my cabinet, and it actually has been working out very well for me, particularly because this is something that I do just about every morning, and one of the things that I use it for is, I suffer from anxiety and depression, so a lot of times I began using tea as an uplifting thing, something to kind of give myself, the little extra to get out the door in the morning, and also, I also used it for calming myself, and then it just kind of it became a whole new thing, and I think one of the best things that I started incorporating with tea when I actually came into my practice was the fact that it was the easiest and most accessible way for me to incorporate the elements in a way that was meaningful to me, because I'm one of those people, like I said, I just take in what matters to me and I throw out all the rest, and I'm much less structured in the way that I do a lot of things, but I do admit that there is importance in acknowledging and using the elements. I just don't have a lot of representation of them that I incorporate into my ritual. So having tea was a way for me to become very mindful and actually start appreciating the different elements, because all 4 elements can be found in a cup of tea. Because with a cup of tea, you have fire in the heat of the cup, of the water. You have the water itself that the tea is steeped in. The tea leaves that are the earth. And then, what am I missing? The air.
Yeah, that one's probably a little trickier.
I don't think so. Not really to me, because the simple act of
Blowing on your tea?
Breathing it in, the steam that rises up is
a
combination of water and air. And actually putting the element of air into a cup of tea has actually been one of the more meaningful practices with me in my tea magic, is the fact that a lot of things that I don't really do this with candles, but for a lot of other things, whenever I'm trying to put myself, like my intentions or something into it, not only do I do the whole like energy from my body to my arms to my hands into the whatever, I do that, yeah. But the one that is also the most meaningful to me that I was just doing instinctually was blowing my essence through my breath into it. Like, I still do this whenever I'm putting intention into like an object. I will like gather my intention and blow into it or blow onto it.
You know what's funny about that? A lot of creation myths, species, especially humans, were breathed into life.
And I also like the fact that with like a lot of animals, in order to like communicate or to establish initial connection involves like breathing, like them smelling you or breathing onto you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially, I was raised around horses when I was little. And one of the initial ways that I would introduce myself to a new horse, very, very gently, you know, you do your general introduction of bribing them.
That works.
Being very gentle, very sweet. Bribing them is always good. And then very, very gently, like breathing onto their muzzle into their nostrils to get the scent of you. At least that's what I was taught from, you know, my aunt and my uncle that owned the horses. And actually it worked very well, and it was a good way for me to connect. And I guess ever since I was little, I had that idea of breathing myself out into something or breathing myself into something. And it just kind of got incorporated into my tea practice. But I really wanted to talk to you guys about all this because it is so easily accessible in the way that it can be done. Like, you may have to hide a whole bunch of different things from different people because you may not be comfortable with it or it may not be safe, but very rarely is someone going to raise their eyebrow at you making a cup of tea.
Yeah, no, unless the only way I could see that happening is maybe if you didn't drink tea before and you all of a sudden picked it up. They might be like, oh, is that new? But that's, you know, weirdest case scenario I could even think of. Normally it's just, oh, you drink tea now. Yes, I do.
And in that case, you can start with more accessible teas or teas that other people will be more understanding about you drinking, like chamomile tea. A lot of people are not going to raise their eyebrows about chamomile tea, especially if you tell them, you know, oh, you know, I'm just using it to relax, or, oh, it helps me sleep. Or, oh, my friend recommended it to me, you know. And then you can generally just very easily start incorporating more teas because they're like, oh, she must have really liked the chamomile tea. Or
especially if you start getting, I know Teavana doesn't exist anymore, but a lot of places that have like loose leaf tea, especially, like if you start really getting into tea, that's going to be where you're getting a lot of blends and stuff.
And if you actually find that it works for you, you can start creating your own tea blends, and that's really magical. But this is one of those things where I've got all these different teas and they all have a different meaning. And I think it's really useful for like adding different elements into a spell that you're doing. Like I use cinnamon tea a lot to add a little spice, add a little fire, passion, love. You know, we talked about this in an herb video, but still. But it's also, teas can be used in a bunch of different things other than just taking it in as a drink. Maybe not with cinnamon, but with some other teas, it would be a really good addition into a bath ritual for different properties. You interested in the cinnamon, Alex?
No, I didn't really, no. Don't we all? I literally just thought they said cinnamon tea, not stick. So I was looking for like what the blend was.
Oh!
That was me being a derp.
But yeah. And even if you are attracted to a tea that doesn't automatically have a metaphysical use that you can find, like some of these are pretty apparent, like what I just talked about with cinnamon, or with apples for femininity. I want to say like longevity. I use it a lot for health and well-being and prosperity, and sometimes I do it for knowledge, but not very often. But even if something doesn't automatically have a metaphysical use that you can find or adherent correspondences, you can create a correspondence to go with a tea if it really matters to you. Like I started doing this with these two here on the bottom. One of them is a blackcurrant burst, which I don't even know if there is a metaphysical use for it or correspondence that is natural to blackcurrant tea, but I found it at a grocery store. It was like $2 and I was like, ooh, that sounds really good, and I bought it. I brought it home, and the first cup I ever made, I drank it and I was like, this is wonderful. It's tart, but it's kind of strong, and it's got, you know, a little bit of earthiness to it. So like, this is really good for grounding.
I was gonna say,
and it just kind of came to me. I was like, this is good for grounding. this is good for protection. So that's what I do. Whenever I'm feeling very shaky at my core, or I need a little bit of grounding, or I feel like I'm going into a situation where I need a little extra, just a little extra protection, or dealing with negativity, I will make myself blackcurrant tea. I did the same thing with this one, which I'm actually really beginning to enjoy this brand, the Tezo.
Whatever it is.
But this one is peachy green, so it's green tea with peach added to it, and I use it a lot for energy. Like, I use the green tea bit for energy and for just being more accessible to things, I guess. And then I actually use the peach for, I love peach. It's like my favorite fruit.
Yeah.
So I use the peach aspect of it for happiness, and for whatever reason, I associate the peach with the sun, like with solar energy, because it's very warm.
I feel like a lot of fruit probably because they ripen in the sun.
And I actually do that the same with like lemon teas and citrus teas. That's very like sun energy to me. It's very happiness oriented. So I particularly use this one if I'm feeling very gray and gloomy, and I really need to like brighten myself.
Real quick, on the black tea, you're probably really close because it's black tea.
Oh,
so
yeah.
The actual herb itself, I'm not sure on the blackcurrant part, but maybe because it's blackcurrant too.
Well, it's a very dark berry.
But yeah, so dark colors especially are associated with protection, grounding kind of stuff. So you're probably spot on if I'm going to take a
But
guess.
sometimes you can just go based on flavor. What, drink it in. What does it remind you of? What does it taste like? Is it sweet like happiness? Is it tart and strong? Is it very grassy? Things like little things like this. Is it spicy? All of these little things will come together to tell you what a tea can be used for, but always go with something that is meaningful to you. I think like tea magic itself, when actually you get down to it, it's very basic, but you can put more into it. It can either be as simple as you want it to be, or it can be as fancy as you want it to be. Like generally when I started out, what I was just doing is I was steeping my water and thinking about like the heat of it, like the fire going into like boiling the water, just because I was just thinking about it, I guess. And then like putting the tea bags in, and that turned into me thinking about the earth element about it. And then letting it steep, and while it's steeping, I would always just, I don't know why, I would just end up holding it in my hands, and I would just start thinking about what was coming. Like if a lot of times I do my tea magic in the morning right before work, and I take the cup to work with me. So I would be thinking like, what is my day going to be like? What is upcoming? And I would be thinking about those things, and then I would think about the tea itself and kind of use that to bridge the way into setting my intention for it. So if I was doing the blackcurrant, I would just be thinking, okay, this is what my day is going to be. This is how I'm feeling inside. And then the tea, I would just take a moment, think about, and recall the feeling of grounding, the feeling of banishing negativity, of protection. And while I'm smelling the tea, like steeping in it, it helps me to set my intention. And then I'm one of those people that I do like numbers. I do like numerology. So I will stir for a certain amount of times to also set intention, especially if I'm adding other things into the tea as I'm going. And almost every tea that I make, I add honey to it because I love honey. That's just
honey is delicious.
It is. But I add honey, and as I'm adding other ingredients, I'm thinking about what each of those ingredients brings or adds into it. And sometimes I'll say it out loud. Sometimes if you can't do that, say it in your mind or just imagine it. I'm a very visual person. I use a lot of like just imagery while I'm doing things. But adding honey is, I've always found it to be a very, like to sweeten things I use it to bring in additional happiness. Like for whatever reason, like the golden color of the honey, it reminds me of the sun. It reminds me of happiness, of like laying on like grass in a field, like in the sun. So.
I want to make a video about honey jars actually sometime in the near future. And the reason why they're honey jars is because there's a lot of magic behind honey, so we're going to talk about that more here in another video probably. But you would add honey to a lot of things to sweeten the deal. And romance and finance and the one thing that it was funny, I think watching or reading something about this, and a lot of people would be like, oh, is honey good for like promotions or something at work? And the only reason you have to be careful with intent on that is because you would add honey to, you want your boss or whoever's in charge to think of you in relation to a promotion. But some people
like, hey, honey, how you doing?
Some people were getting that effect instead.
Yeah.
Of, they, out of probably nowhere, they just started getting hit on real hard. And they're like, whoa. So that's the only thing, like, just intention.
Yeah, and one of the things I would like to talk about in the future in regards to honey is the fact that not only is it really good for drawing things in, it's also really good for trapping things. Because if you actually think about the actual physical properties of honey, like, bacteria cannot breed in honey.
And it lasts forever.
So, yeah, and it lasts forever. It's really good for drawing things in, trapping it inside of the honey, and then it can't get away. But it also can't breed more negativity. So you can use it to drown something in sweetness, or you can use it to trap negative things and then just dispose of the honey in a reasonable way. So things like that. And that's something that we'll get into in the future.
This one's a little different.
Oh, yeah.
She just got this one the other day, actually. And it is for any vegans or people that are that are concerned for the bees. And again, there's a disclaimer in the other video, but it's probably going to be this one too. Bee products, especially if they're done at a farmer's market or you're getting them directly from an apiary or something. The farmers are very invested in their bees. They're not going to do something that's going to hurt or damage or otherwise cause misery to their bees. But this one is a vegan honey. It is made with apples.
Yes, it is made with...
So for anyone that cares, there is alternatives.
Yes, it is bee-free, hive-free. So they don't use hives, they don't use bees. I am not opposed to using honey that was gathered from hives, just because I haven't seen any evidence that it harms the bees in any way. But, I digress.
It's really good.
Yes, it is. And the good thing with adding honey to teas is you can have different kinds of honey, and that will have different properties to it. Like, she actually ended up getting some orange blossom honey from our local farmer's market as well. But, so, yes, it really is. But all of these things, like having one that has orange blossom in it, adding that citrus, adding that extra sun to it, like that would be a wonderful, like, I would use it for like confidence. That would go very well in a confidence blend, or
it's like a sweeter zest. It's not quite as zesty as like an orange because it's orange blossom, but yeah, it's got a little more perkiness to it.
But I would blend it with like a self-love
I can see that.
tea as well. So all of you can come up with so many different combinations by looking at what you need, what you want, and then kind of thinking about the different flavors. And it's so easily, like, it's so easily done on the slide. Like, no one's gonna, like, you're just sitting here drinking something. No one's gonna know that you've been, like, in your mind going through an incantation or, flowing your intentions into a cup. And then breathing it in, drinking it in, taking it into yourself and carrying it with you. It's such a powerful, potent thing. But I think that's mostly it.
I thought the other thing we should maybe touch on is because you were talking about cup in the morning. You can also do cup in the evening.
Yes.
I would definitely probably recommend, unless you're like me.
Mm-hmm.
Caffeine doesn't affect me in the typical way.
Oh yeah, it makes
puts
you
me to
sleepy.
sleep. It's not pleasant when you are trying to actually wake up and nothing helps, but I digress. But there are teas, especially like lavender teas. Chamomile's real good at night.
There's also like the sleepy time tea. Like ones like these that are the samplers are really good, especially if you want a whole bunch of different teas to try, or if you don't really know what you like. I want to say this box was like $2 at the grocery store. Yeah, it was a really good deal, and it came with 5 different flavors, and I've tried like three or four of these already, and they're all delicious. But yes, chamomile, really good for calming and for nighttime stuff. Same thing with the sleepy time, and that can also be incorporated into other types of magic. Like I have drank a specially intentioned cup of tea before going to bed at night for dream recall.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Or different types of dreams, like if you were trying to, if you're good with that, like I have no control.
I've also done tea before doing an astral trip, like an astral travel where I go and like talk to people and like use that to get some insight on things. So there are so many different ways that you can incorporate tea into other practices that just kind of helps you further what you're wanting to do. Just add a little extra punch.
And the only other thing I was mentioning, because I was thinking about mentioning this in an herb video, but this made more sense because it was a whole tea video.
Yeah.
For teas that are blends, like I have another tea that has like a lot of spices, like it's ginger, cardamom, turmeric, and some other stuff. If you're in a real pinch and it's easier for you to have teas, you can just grab that and steep the bag or open it and dump that out into like a bottle or some other kind of magic working. Like if that's all you got, look at your blends especially. And
that's actually what I did with this one.
That's
like
straight cinnamon, isn't it?
It's cinnamon and
Yeah, see, that's what I was looking for. Technical difficulties. So we were talking about snipping tea bags for spells on the fly.
Yeah, which I was mentioning. I actually did that with this one because at the time I had run out of cinnamon. So I actually had to cut open a tea bag and like, I'm sorry about this, but it should still work.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really ground up herb in a tea bag. That's all tea really is. So yeah, you just make stuff work with what you got. And, if you don't use spices in cooking, this might be a better option because you might like tea to drink and then you already have it for workings. It's probably more expensive though.
Tea for workings?
Yeah, like if you're just using tea because like a box of tea is like what you said, $2.
Yeah.
But like this whole thing of salt might have been like $2. And like that's gonna do a lot more than a couple tea bags. Size-wise. But like we said, if that's what you got, that's what you got. Use what you got.
But yeah, I just really wanted to make this into a real quick video about tea magic and just how it can be really accessible and how you can do a lot with it with really simple things. Because even if you just have your simple teas going on, like I said before, you can add things into it. I actually have something coming up in the future where I'm probably going to need to have some not co-work, but like coordination, cooperation, like working with other people as a unit, as a team for projects and stuff. So I was actually thinking about like adding honeycomb. Instead of just straight honey, just adding honeycomb to the teacup. Because when I think of bees and I think of honeycombs, I think of that hardworking, that cooperation, that partnership.
Community.
Very Three of Pentacles feel to it. I know a lot of tarot gets incorporated into the way I think about things. But it's...
Videos to come.
Yes. But it's different elements that you can add that make sense to you to get you where you need to go. And it's simple, it's easily accessible, it's easy to hide or easy to be sneaky about.
Yeah.
But I think that's pretty. Is that pretty much it? I said that before.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that covers it. Tea to wake up. Tea to go to bed. Tea for spell work.
Yeah.
Tea to cut up.
But yeah. So I hope that you enjoyed this really brief talk about tea magic. All right.